I never thought things would unravel like this, not in a million years. It was just an ordinary day, one of those you barely remember. I was on the couch, aimlessly flipping through channels, when the sharp sound of a car door slamming pulled me out of my daze. At first I brushed it off as just another noise from the neighbor's driveway, nothing unusual. But something about it gnawed at me, a feeling I couldn't quite shake. Glancing up, I caught sight of her, Olivia, my wife, walking through the door with someone unfamiliar by her side. I didn't recognize the guy's face, but his swagger said it all. Confidence oozed from the way he moved, like he owned the place. Tight jeans, cocky stride. He was younger than me, that much was obvious. I didn't need a formal introduction. My gut told me exactly who he was. And worse, what he meant. She didn't even try to cover it up anymore. For weeks, maybe months, I'd ignored the warning signs. The late nights, her erratic moods, the way her voice turned distant when she spoke to me, it had all been there, staring me in the face. But seeing her now, standing there with him, laughing like she hadn't just shattered everything we built, that was different. It was real. Her laugh, God, her laugh. It used to be warm, genuine, like sunshine breaking through clouds. Now it was something else entirely, playful, coy, like it belonged to someone I didn't know. As they talked, her smile was so radiant it almost hurt to look at. It wasn't for me anymore, it hadn't been for a while. The realization settled over me like a cold shadow. My chest tightened as I got to my feet, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. I didn't know whether it was the shock or the anger boiling inside me, but I could feel my whole body trembling. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but all I could do was stand there in stunned silence, watching them. The guy barely glanced at me, and when he did, his expression was dismissive, like I was nothing more than an afterthought. Olivia didn't even acknowledge me. She was too busy chatting with him, probably about something trivial, something they'd both forget by tomorrow. But the way she leaned in, the way she laughed, it made my stomach twist into knots. I was a ghost in my own home. When I heard the echo of her heels clicking toward the bedroom, my instinct was to follow her, to confront her right then and there. But I stopped myself. I needed answers, not an explosion. Still, how could I demand the truth when I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies? The life I thought we had, it wasn't real, was it? After the guy left, those next few hours dragged on like an eternity. I couldn't sit still. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smirk on her face, heard her laugh like I didn't even exist. My mind raced, spinning wild scenarios, each one worse than the last. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't new. The betrayal had been there, festering beneath the surface for longer than I cared to admit. I needed proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes, even if it tore me apart. So, I made up my mind. I went through her things, her phone, her laptop, her emails, anything that might give me a clue. And it didn't take long. Hidden in a password-protected folder on her phone were the messages I'd been dreading. Messages between her and him. The messages hit me like a sucker punch straight to the gut. Each word cut deeper than the last, explicit, raw, and painfully intimate. These were things she'd never shared with me, thoughts and desires I didn't even know she had. My stomach churned as I forced myself to read through them, unable to stop but desperate to unsee every damning detail. It wasn't just the words. It was the realization that the life I thought we had was nothing more than a facade. My hands shook as I scrolled further, each revelation adding weight to the crushing truth. They had been meeting in secret for weeks, maybe even longer. All those late nights at work, the so-called girls' nights, and the endless excuses, they all made sense now. My mind raced back to the countless times she looked me in the eye and lied. The trust I'd held on to so tightly shattered in an instant, and I felt the betrayal hit me like a freight train. I leaned back in my chair, staring at her phone as if it might somehow explain itself. How could she do this? How could she destroy everything we built together so carelessly? It felt like my whole world was collapsing, and I was powerless to stop it. But one thought rose above the whirlwind of emotions: I need answers. I heard her footsteps before I saw her, steady and nonchalant, as if nothing had happened. She walked back into the room, carrying the same casual air she'd had all day, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The moment she stepped through the door, I stood up, her phone clutched tightly in my hand. "What the hell is this, Olivia?" My voice was cold, trembling with raw emotion I could barely contain. Her eyes widened for a split second, a flicker of surprise she quickly masked with a sugary smile. "What's wrong, babe?" she asked, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. "Why are you acting so dramatic?" "Dramatic?" I snapped, my voice rising. "You think I'm being dramatic when you're screwing around with some guy behind my back?" The color drained from her face, and for a fleeting moment, guilt flashed in her eyes. But just as quickly she buried it under an exasperated shake of her head. "Oh, come on! Not this again! You're being ridiculous!" "Ridiculous?" My voice cracked, fury and disbelief mixing in equal measure. "You've been lying to me, Olivia! For how long? How long has this been going on?" She sighed, her gaze dropping to the floor. "It's not what you think," she muttered, her tone defensive. I laughed bitterly, the sound foreign even to me. "Really? Because the messages I just found don't exactly support that, do they? You've been seeing him for months, haven't you?" Her eyes finally met mine, and there it was, the smirk. That smug, infuriating smirk I once found endearing now felt like a slap in the face. "You don't understand," she said coolly. "I'm not happy, okay? I haven't been happy for a long time. You've been so focused on your career, so busy with your own stuff, you didn't even notice me slipping away. I needed someone else. Someone who actually sees me." Her words were daggers, each one sinking deeper than the last. "So this is my fault?" I choked out, barely able to form the words. "You're blaming me for your affair?" She shrugged, her expression eerily casual. "Maybe. Maybe not. But I'm not sorry. You didn't care enough, and he did. So yeah, I found what I needed elsewhere." I clenched my fists, my entire body trembling with rage. "You're unbelievable," I growled. "You think it's that easy? You think you can just walk away from everything we've built together like it's nothing?" She rolled her eyes, her voice laced with disdain. "Honestly? I don't owe you an explanation. I've already made my choice. If you can't handle it, then leave. But don't stand there pretending you're some innocent victim when you've ignored me for years." Her words stung more than I thought possible. The cold detachment in her voice, the complete absence of remorse. It was like I was looking at a stranger. The woman I had vowed to spend my life with was gone, replaced by a stranger, someone unrecognizable, someone I wasn't sure I wanted to know anymore. Words failed me. The anger inside me burned hot, but beneath it, something colder and darker began to take hold. A hollow ache, like the first crack in a dam about to burst. I could have walked away right then. Demanded a divorce, packed my bags, and left her standing there in her smug, detached indifference. But the thought of losing everything, our life, our home, the future I had imagined, froze me in place. The betrayal was too raw, too sharp, to make sense of. And yet one thing was clear. There would be no forgiveness. Not now, not ever. The silence between us stretched on, suffocating and heavy, though it probably lasted only seconds. My chest felt tight, like my heart was working overtime just to keep me upright. I stared at her, this woman I'd once cherished, standing before me like a stranger. She didn't flinch. Her face was a mask of indifference, her posture practically screaming defiance. It was like trying to reason with a stone. "You're really just going to stand there and act like I'm the one who ruined everything?" The words escaped before I could stop them, trembling with frustration and disbelief. She shrugged, the gesture so casual it made my blood boil. "I'm not saying you ruined everything," she said, her tone maddeningly indifferent. "I'm just saying you weren't there when I needed you." She crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly, as if I were the unreasonable one in all this. "Maybe I would have stayed loyal if you'd actually paid attention. But honestly, I was suffocating. I needed someone who could make me feel alive." "Alive?" I repeated, my voice sharp with disbelief. "You're telling me this is about feeling alive? You destroyed everything we had, for that?" She didn't even blink. Instead, she gave another shrug, that faint, smug smile tugging at her lips. "You make it sound like I've committed some unforgivable crime," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. "But I haven't. I'm just taking care of myself for once. I've spent years taking care of you, this house, everything. And where has it gotten me? Stuck in a loveless marriage, feeling alone. I'm tired of pretending." Her words landed like slaps, each one harder than the last. The casual way she spoke, like we were discussing a bad meal or a rainy day, cut deeper than any anger ever could. There was no regret, no remorse, just cold detachment. I couldn't see any trace of the woman I married in her anymore. For a split second, I felt like I might lose control. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to demand she explain herself, beg for forgiveness. But as I stood there, I realized something painful and undeniable. I didn't want her apology. I didn't want her empty words. I already had the truth, and it didn't make any of this easier to bear. "Do you even care about me anymore?" I asked, my voice cracking, softer now, almost a whisper. It was a fragile question, one that felt like the last thread keeping me tethered to what we had. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, and I thought I saw something, hesitation, maybe even guilt. But then she looked away, her face hardening again. "You're still stuck on that, huh?" she said, her tone cold, almost dismissive. "Of course I care about you. But caring? It's not enough. It never was. You were too busy with your job, your friends, your life outside of us. I was just a side note. I needed more. Someone who was actually there." I wanted to scream at her, remind her of all the times I'd been there, of everything I'd sacrificed for her, for us. I wanted to tell her how wrong she was, how much it hurt. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. Not to her. She'd already made her choice. The truth was, no matter what I said, no matter how many words I threw into the void between us, nothing would change. The damage was done. And then, she did something unexpected. She stepped closer, closing the distance between us, her eyes narrowing like she was sizing me up. Without thinking, I stepped back, instinctively recoiling. This entire conversation had felt like a twisted game, a battle for control, but now it was like she was searching for something. Not forgiveness, not regret, something darker. Almost as if she was daring me to react. "You're angry," she said, her voice low and disturbingly calm, laced with amusement. "I can see it in your eyes. But you won't do anything. You never do." She tilted her head, studying me like a predator sizing up its prey. "You'll just stand there and let me talk, let me say what I've been holding in for years. And you'll take it. Like you always do." Her words were a jab, sharp and deliberate. She took a step closer, her voice dropping even lower. "You've always been passive. Never demanding. Never standing up for yourself. Maybe that's why I couldn't stay. Maybe that's why I ended up in his bed instead of yours." The words sliced through me like a blade, each one sharper than the last. She knew exactly where to strike, how to hurt me in ways no one else could. The worst part? There was some truth in what she said. I had always been the peacekeeper, the one who stayed calm, who made sure everyone else was happy. I'd built my life around being the good guy. But in trying so hard to keep the peace, I'd lost myself. And I'd lost her. "I can't do this," I muttered, my voice trembling. The words barely made it out of my mouth. "I can't keep pretending I'm okay with any of this." Her eyes flickered with something. Was it satisfaction? Amusement? I couldn't tell. Whatever it was, it wasn't remorse. "Then don't," she said simply. "I'm not asking you to. I've already made my choice. You can either accept it or not. It's that simple." The way she said it, the complete lack of emotion, made my stomach churn. Then her face twisted into something cruel, almost mocking, as she took a step back. "But don't think for a second you're going to guilt-trip me into feeling bad for living my life. I'm done." Her words landed like a final blow. I stood there, paralyzed, as my mind struggled to process everything unraveling around me. "You're done?" I finally asked, my voice barely steady. It came out broken, cracking under the weight of disbelief. Just like that? She looked me dead in the eye, and for the first time, her gaze felt completely empty. Yeah, she said, her tone as cold as the look on her face. Just like that. And then she walked past me. No hesitation, no pause. It was like I wasn't even there, just another piece of furniture in her way. I turned to watch her leave, unable to move, unable to speak. The door slammed behind her with a finality that echoed through the house, louder than it should have been. And just like that, she was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet, it was heavy, oppressive, filled with everything unsaid and undone. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of what had just happened settled in. The woman I loved, the life I thought we had, it was all gone, shattered in an instant. I wanted to scream, to break something, to do anything to release the storm building inside me. But instead I felt nothing. Just numbness. My hands hung uselessly at my sides as the weight of it all crushed down on me. I tried to breathe, but even the air in the room felt thick, suffocating. The house felt different now, smaller, darker, as if the walls were pressing in. I could still hear the echo of the door slamming behind her, like a gunshot reverberating through my mind. My entire world had crumbled around me, and I was powerless to stop it. The anger, the hurt, the disbelief, it was all swirling together into something I couldn't even name. I stood there, motionless, for what felt like hours. The truth of it was undeniable, she wasn't coming back. And neither was the life I thought I had. The cold night air wrapped around me, sharp and biting, but it didn't clear my mind. My thoughts kept spiraling, pulling me deeper into the darkness I couldn't escape. Every step I took felt heavy, like I was dragging the weight of my shattered life behind me. The street was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that only made the noise in my head louder. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to escape the suffocating stillness of the house that no longer felt like a home. My footsteps echoed faintly, a stark reminder that I was alone. Truly, utterly alone. Olivia's words played on a loop in my mind. I needed someone who could make me feel alive. That phrase hit me harder with every repetition, like a hammer striking a nail deeper into my heart. How had I missed the signs? The late nights, the excuses, the distance. I had chalked it all up to stress, to life's inevitable ups and downs. But now, it was clear, I had been blind, willfully blind. The shame clawed at me, relentless and unforgiving. I had always prided myself on being steady, dependable. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving her space, trusting her. But now I questioned everything. Was I too focused on work? Did I not show her enough affection? Was I boring? The doubts were like parasites, feeding on my pain, growing stronger with every question I couldn't answer. I stopped walking and leaned against the street lamp, my breath visible in the freezing air. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, but the memories came flooding back. Our first date, when she wore that blue dress and couldn't stop laughing at my bad jokes. The way she smiled at me on our wedding day, like I was her whole world. The nights we stayed up talking about the future, dreaming about the life we would build together. And now, all of it felt like a lie. I opened my eyes and looked up at the sky. The stars were faint, barely visible against the city lights, but they were there. They seemed so distant, so untouchable. It was a cruel reminder of how small I felt in this moment, how insignificant I was in the grand scheme of things. My marriage, my pain, it was nothing to the universe. But to me, it was everything. I let out a shaky breath, my chest tightening with the effort. I couldn't stay like this, couldn't keep drowning in my own thoughts. I needed to do something, to take some kind of action. But what? What could I do now that the foundation of my life had crumbled beneath me? For the first time in what felt like hours, I allowed myself to feel the anger, to embrace it. Not just at Olivia, but at myself. For trusting too much, for ignoring the signs, for believing that love was enough to fix everything. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. This wasn't just heartbreak, it was humiliation, betrayal, and a sense of loss so profound I didn't know if I could recover. But I knew one thing, I couldn't go back to that house, to those memories, not tonight. I started walking again, faster this time, my footsteps firm against the pavement. I didn't know where I was heading, but I knew I needed to keep moving. Because if I stopped, even for a moment, I was afraid I might never start again. I wandered aimlessly, letting my legs carry me wherever they chose. My thoughts kept circling back to Olivia, to the way her face looked as she walked away. There wasn't a shred of regret in her expression, just cold indifference. She'd made her decision, and she wasn't looking back. The realization hit me like a brick. The woman I loved, the one I thought I knew better than anyone, had already let me go. I stopped outside a bar, unsure why I had even ended up there. The flickering neon lights above the door seemed almost taunting. I stood there for a moment, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I was utterly alone. Olivia was probably with him somewhere, laughing, moving on like I was nothing more than a fading memory. Pushing through the door, I went straight to the counter and ordered the strongest drink they had. I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to think. The bartender gave me a long, questioning look, but I ignored it. I was there to drown out the chaos in my head. The first sip burned its way down my throat, but the pain in my chest didn't budge. So I drank again. And again. The haze of alcohol started to settle in, but it couldn't touch the emptiness that had rooted itself deep inside me. When I finally stepped back out into the night, I felt like a shadow of myself, a hollow shell of the man I used to be. I had no direction, no plan. Everything I thought I knew had been turned on its head, and I had no idea how to piece it all back together. Could I ever forgive her? Could I forget the way she betrayed me? The answer hit me harder than the alcohol ever could: no. There was no going back from this. No apology would ever mend what was broken. But even as I stood there, grappling with the wreckage, a small sliver of hope refused to die. A part of me still wondered if healing was possible. Was there a way forward? A way to rebuild, even after everything? Because as much as it hurt, as much as her actions had shattered me, I couldn't shake the truth: I had loved her. Some part of me still did, even if I hated myself for it. The walk home was quiet, but the silence felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me with every step. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, if there even was a tomorrow for us. All I knew was that the life I thought I had was gone, and there was no bringing it back. The days that followed blurred together, a mix of numbness and raw, aching pain. I couldn't tell you what I did most of the time. The hours dragged on without purpose, and the only thing I knew for sure was that I was a mess. Work became an escape, a way to distract myself from the crushing weight of what had happened. But even there, my thoughts betrayed me, drifting back to the empty house, the life that had unraveled so quickly. In the evenings, I'd sit in silence, replaying everything over and over. The look on her face when she admitted the truth. The sound of the door closing behind her. Her words, sharp and unforgiving, hung in the air like a storm cloud. She was done with me. And no matter how many times I replayed it, it still felt surreal. I tried to keep myself busy. I took long walks, made half-hearted attempts at cooking, even rearranged furniture in the hope that changing my surroundings might change how I felt. But it was useless. The truth was always there, waiting for me the moment I stopped moving. It was like a weight pressing on my chest, reminding me that she was gone, and nothing would bring her back. Every day felt like I was just going through the motions, waiting for something, anything, to pull me out of the darkness. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find the light. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table picking at a meal I hadn't even wanted to make, my phone buzzed. At first, I dismissed the buzz, figuring it was just another piece of junk mail or one of those work emails that could wait. But when the second notification came through, and I saw the name, my stomach twisted into knots. Olivia. I froze, staring at the screen like it might bite me. I hadn't seen her name, let alone her face, since that night. After everything, I convinced myself I was better off without her, but the sight of her name alone stirred something deep inside me, something dark and uncomfortable, something I hated acknowledging. Before I could talk myself out of it, I unlocked my phone and read the message. Just 3 words: "Can we talk?" It wasn't much, but those words carried the weight of all the things I'd been running from. As I stared at them, emotions hit me in waves: anger, confusion, and to my surprise, a flicker of hope. Hope? For what? That she'd apologize? That she'd beg for another chance? A part of me, one I didn't want to admit existed, almost craved that. I wanted to see her grovel, to hear her plead for my forgiveness, even though I knew I'd never trust her again. But I also couldn't lie to myself. I wanted answers. My hand shook as I took a breath and typed out a reply. "What do you want, Olivia?" Her response came almost instantly. "I made a mistake. I was stupid. I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. But I need to explain. Please." I set the phone down like it had burned me. My chest felt tight, my heart hammering like it was trying to break free. What was I supposed to do with that? After everything she'd done, how could she just show up in my life again and expect me to listen? The audacity made my blood boil. She didn't care about what I was feeling, she never had. I knew she wasn't sorry, not really. Yet, despite everything, part of me still wanted to hear her admit it. To have her lay it all out in the open. I walked over to the window, staring out at the quiet street below. Everything out there seemed normal, peaceful even, completely unaffected by the storm raging inside me. That contrast made me feel isolated, like I was trapped in some alternate reality no one else could see. As I stood there, something shifted in me. It wasn't the anger or heartbreak I'd grown used to carrying. It was something sharper, clearer. A kind of icy realization. I couldn't go back. Not now, not ever. What she'd done wasn't just a betrayal, it was disgusting. The lies, the deceit, how quickly she'd thrown away everything we'd built for some fleeting thrill. For someone else. I wasn't a fool anymore. I wasn't going to let her drag me back into that mess of lies and selfishness. But even with that clarity, I couldn't stop the ache for the woman I thought she was. The woman I had loved so deeply. I took another deep breath and typed my reply, making sure there was no room for doubt. "It's over, Olivia. You made your choice, and I'm not going to let you mess with my head again. You don't get to come back and act like nothing happened." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The hours that followed were a blur. I kept my phone within arm's reach, expecting a flood of texts or calls, something dramatic, maybe even desperate. But there was nothing. Silence. The silence was unbearable, like a heavy, suffocating blanket. I felt an odd mix of relief and emptiness, a strange contradiction that I couldn't shake. The constant weight on my chest, the one I'd carried for so long, was gone. But in its place was something just as oppressive: loneliness. It wasn't just the loss of Olivia that haunted me, it was the future we'd planned, the life I thought we'd have together. The house that once felt warm, alive with laughter and love, now felt cold and hollow, like a tomb filled with echoes of memories I couldn't escape. As the hours crawled by, I came to an unsettling realization. There wasn't going to be any closure, not from her and maybe not even from within myself. Life wasn't a storybook. There wouldn't be a clean ending, no perfect resolution. If I wanted to move forward, I'd have to figure it out on my own. The weeks that followed were slow, messy, and painfully uncertain. But I started to rebuild, piece by fragile piece. I took a step I'd been avoiding for years. I found a therapist. Sitting in that office, untangling the mess of emotions that seemed to have no end, was terrifying but necessary. I spent more time with my friends, even though I didn't feel fully present, trying to remind myself that the world hadn't stopped turning just because mine had. I began carving out time for myself, signing up for activities that had nothing to do with Olivia or the life we'd shared. These were things just for me, small acts of defiance against the grip of my past. It wasn't easy. Every step forward felt heavy, like dragging a weight behind me. She was still there in my thoughts, in the quiet moments, lingering like a shadow I couldn't outrun. I wondered, more often than I cared to admit, what might have been if she hadn't left, if she hadn't betrayed me. But day by day, the pieces of my shattered life began to form something new. It wasn't perfect, and it sure as hell wasn't the life I'd envisioned, but it was mine. For the first time in what felt like forever, I began to believe I could heal. I didn't need Olivia anymore. I wouldn't let her control my emotions or my future. Still, the days that followed were like walking a tightrope between my past and my future. One part of me was determined to move forward, to leave the wreckage of our marriage behind, but another part couldn't quite let go. Memories of her, of us, clung to me, stubborn and unyielding. I'd see her smile in my mind, hear her laugh, and suddenly I was back there, in the good times, the moments that felt so real and unbreakable. I kept busy, throwing myself into work, staying late at the office, trying to revive the career I'd neglected during my marriage. I took long walks at night, spent hours at the gym, and even revisited hobbies I hadn't touched in years. It was all a distraction, a desperate attempt to fill the void, to stitch up the wound that refused to heal. But no matter what I did, I couldn't stop the questions that gnawed at me. Did I want to forgive her? Or did I want to burn every last connection to her? Some days I was certain the trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. Other days I found myself lost in memories of the life we had built together, the laughter, the dreams, the love I thought would last forever. I hated that I still cared, hated that I still missed her. I felt stuck in a purgatory, unable to move forward but unwilling to go back. One night, as I sat in that familiar silence, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just a text. It was a voicemail. Something about it felt different, heavier. My gut twisted as I pressed play, bracing myself for what was to come. Something in my gut told me this was it, the moment of truth. It felt like everything could either come crashing down around me or start to piece itself back together. My thumb hovered over the play button as I hesitated, the familiar conflict tugging at me. A part of me screamed that listening to this message was a mistake, that it would pull me right back into the chaos I'd fought so hard to escape. But curiosity, and maybe desperation for some kind of closure, won out. So I pressed play. Her voice came through, shaky and fragile, but unmistakably hers. "I know I don't deserve to ask you this, but please hear me out," she said, her voice breaking on the last word. I could hear the rawness in her tone, the weight she carried. For a fleeting second, I felt something stir, a flicker of hope, but I stamped it out just as quickly. I couldn't afford to let myself believe her again. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself," she continued, her voice trembling. "But I can't live with myself knowing I hurt you like this. I know I betrayed you, and I regret it every single day. I don't even recognize who I've become, and I just need you to know, I never wanted to hurt you." There was a pause, filled only by her shaky breathing. "I don't know what came over me, and now, it's too late. You're gone. And I'm empty without you." Her words hit me like a tidal wave crashing into the shore, relentless and overwhelming. For a moment I felt something deep inside, a pang that I couldn't fully define. Was it pity? Sorrow? Or just the ghost of the love I had once felt for her? She sounded so broken, so sincere in that moment. But was it real? Or just another layer to the web of manipulation she'd spun before? I had spent so many sleepless nights chasing answers, trying to make sense of what went wrong, clinging to the idea that some version of closure might bring me peace. Yet now, as her tearful confession poured from the speaker, something shifted in me. It was as if I could see the truth for what it was. I didn't need her regret. I didn't need her explanation. The woman I had loved had disappeared long ago, and I had been chasing a ghost ever since. I paused the message before it finished. My hand hovered over the phone, my chest tight, the lump in my throat nearly choking me. The decision I had to make felt heavier than anything I'd faced in months. Would I go back? Could I go back? Could I find it in myself to forgive her, after everything she'd done? I thought about the past few months, the endless struggle to regain control of my life, the painstaking effort to rebuild something from the ashes of my marriage. I had spent so much time trying to stitch together the pieces of my heart, despite the persistent ache that refused to go away. And suddenly, I realized something that hit me harder than her words ever could. The only way I could truly move forward was to let it all go. To stop clinging to the wreckage of a life that no longer existed. I wasn't going to go back. I couldn't. Yes, the thought of starting over was terrifying. But at the same time, it was liberating. Olivia had made her choice, and in doing so, she had chosen a life without me. I couldn't keep waiting for her to come back, or for some perfect moment to magically fix everything. That was a fantasy, a lie I had been feeding myself to soften the blow of her betrayal. Without giving myself time to overthink it, I deleted the voicemail. The ache in my chest didn't vanish immediately. It stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my resolve for days afterward, a constant reminder of what I had lost. But gradually, something shifted again. I realized I wasn't losing something irreplaceable. I was letting go of something that was never really mine to hold onto in the first place. The woman I loved, the one I had vowed to spend my life with, was gone. Or maybe, deep down, she had never truly been there, just a facade, hiding behind layers of deceit and manipulation. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself making decisions that I had been avoiding for far too long. I reached out to a lawyer to begin the divorce process. It wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about finally taking a step forward, about closing a chapter that no longer had a future. I didn't expect her to fight me on it. I didn't expect her to plead or try to change my mind. But even if she had, it wouldn't have mattered. My decision was made, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like I was reclaiming my life. The morning after the papers were filed, I woke up feeling different. It wasn't a sudden rush of joy or relief, but there was a quiet sense of lightness, as if a weight I hadn't fully recognized was finally gone. For the first time, there was no pretending, no clinging to the hope that maybe things would work out, or that Olivia would come back and make it all right again. She wasn't coming back. And even if she did, nothing could be undone. I couldn't fix us. And for the first time, I was okay with that. There was a strange freedom in that realization, a quiet kind of strength I hadn't felt in a long time. I had survived the worst of it, and I knew I could keep going. But the days that followed weren't what I had imagined. I thought filing for divorce would bring a sense of triumph, or at least some kind of closure. Instead, I found myself in an unsettling limbo. It felt like I was stepping into a version of my life that didn't quite belong to me yet, a space I didn't fully understand. The house, once filled with memories and moments that defined my old life, now felt cavernous and cold. I'd gotten used to the silence over the months, but this was different. It wasn't the soothing quiet of solitude. It was the kind of silence that pressed down on you, making you feel small, reminding you of how fragile everything really was. Outside, the world moved on as if nothing had changed. People went about their days, their lives, while I stayed stuck in this strange in-between, too shattered to fully move forward, yet far too broken to ever consider going back. And in the stillness of those days, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to confront before. I didn't know who I was anymore. I wasn't Olivia's husband. I wasn't the man I had been before her. I was someone new, someone undefined, and that scared me. But maybe that was okay. Maybe this was my chance to figure it out. To find out who I could be on my own. That didn't mean it was easy. Far from it. There were still moments when the memories of her crept in, uninvited and unwelcome. I'd catch myself remembering her laugh, the way her hand felt in mine, or how she'd snuggle up next to me on the couch, like just being close was enough. But those memories weren't comforting anymore, they were tainted, shadowed by what she had done. It wasn't that I didn't miss her. In some ways, I still did. But it wasn't really her I missed. It was the life I thought we were going to have. The future we had planned together, the dreams we had shared. And that was the hardest part. Letting go of the version of us that I had built in my head, the one that never truly existed. Because that future, no matter how much I wanted it, was never going to happen. And finally accepting that? It was like losing her all over again. But I didn't move. Instead, I just sat there, my hands gripping the edge of the bench like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. My heart was pounding in my chest, a mix of anger, confusion, and something I couldn't quite name. "Olivia," I said finally, my voice colder than I intended. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "I wasn't sure if I'd see you here. I almost didn't come over. Why are you here?" I asked, my tone sharper now. "What do you want?" She looked down at the ground, scuffing the gravel with the toe of her shoe. For a moment, she didn't say anything, and the silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then she looked up, her eyes glistening with something that might have been regret, or maybe it was just for show. I didn't know anymore. I needed to talk to you, she said softly. To explain. Explain? I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. There's nothing left to explain, Olivia. You made your choices. You walked away. And I've been picking up the pieces ever since. I know, she said quickly, her voice cracking. I know I don't deserve your time, or your forgiveness, but I can't live with the way we left things. I can't live with you thinking that everything we had was a lie. I clenched my jaw, her words hitting me in a way I didn't expect. For months, I had been wrestling with that exact thought, that maybe everything we had built together had been fake, that I had been blind to who she really was. Wasn't it, though? I asked, my voice low but steady. Because the woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, wouldn't have done what you did. She wouldn't have lied to me, betrayed me. So tell me, Olivia, what was real? Was any of it real? Her face crumpled, and she took a step closer, but I leaned back, keeping the distance between us. It was real, she said, her voice trembling. All of it was real, at least for me. I know I ruined everything, and I hate myself for it. I hate that I hurt you. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of the truth. But even if she was being sincere, it didn't change what had happened. It didn't erase the pain, the nights I had spent wondering what I had done wrong, why I wasn't enough. You don't get to hate yourself and make this about you, I said, my voice sharper now. You don't get to walk in here and try to rewrite the story to make yourself feel better. I've spent months trying to move on, trying to rebuild my life without you. And now you show up out of nowhere, like you have the right to, what? Clear your conscience? Get closure? She flinched at my words, and for a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know I can't fix this. I know I can't fix us. But I had to tell you, I never stopped loving you. Her words hung in the air, and I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. For a second, just a second, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let myself feel the love I had buried so deeply. But then I remembered the nights I spent alone, the pain of realizing she had chosen someone else, and the long road I had walked just to feel like myself again. I stopped loving you the moment you betrayed me, I said quietly, but firmly. The words felt heavy, but they were the truth. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I understand, she said, her voice barely audible. I needed you to know. I'll leave you alone now. And with that, she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the distance. I sat there, staring at the empty path she had left behind. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to chase after her. I didn't feel the weight of her absence pulling me down. I felt free. Finally, truly free. Yet, there was another side of me, one I despised, that wanted to give her a chance to speak. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. I just had to see you, she said, her eyes dropping to the ground before hesitantly meeting mine again. I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted to apologize. I've been trying to figure everything out. I know I hurt you, and I'll carry that regret for the rest of my life. I never wanted things to end like this. I stared at her, my mind spinning in a million directions. A part of me wanted to listen, to let her explain, to finally hear the apology I had once thought I'd never get. But another part, the one that had been painstakingly piecing my life back together, didn't want to risk falling for her words again. What do you expect from me? I finally asked, my tone cold and unyielding. I can't just erase what you did. I can't forget the lies, the betrayal. You destroyed everything we had, and I can't let you do that to me again. Her face fell, and for a fleeting moment I saw the woman I used to know, the one I had loved so deeply, the one who had shattered me. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said softly. I needed to say I'm sorry. I know it won't change anything, but I couldn't go on without telling you that. I sat there, unsure of how to respond. Part of me still longed for closure, for her to take full responsibility, to give me some sense that I hadn't been completely foolish. But the reality was, there was no closure to be had. No magical phrase could undo what had been done or make everything right again. I appreciate you saying that, I said, my voice steady but distant. But I can't go back. You made your choice, and I've made mine. Standing up, I looked at her one last time, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on me. Goodbye, Olivia, I said, my voice resolute. Then, without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away. The cool breeze swept over me, clearing the fog that had clouded my mind for so long. I didn't need her to fix things. I didn't need her to save me. I had already saved myself. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly free. The night air was crisp, and although the weight of the past still lingered on my chest, I knew I had finally let go. Leaving Olivia behind for good felt like closing a chapter that had drained me for too long. Still, full closure didn't come easily. It was a process, a slow climb that I'd have to keep working at. As I walked through the park, the familiar surroundings seemed to whisper something different to me, an unspoken promise of a fresh start. The darkening sky stretched overhead, and I found myself pausing for a moment, simply breathing it all in. I didn't feel anger or sadness anymore. Instead, I felt an emptiness. But it wasn't the hollow kind that left me broken. It was the kind that meant I had finally let go of the past. It was freedom. And then it hit me, a quiet, startling realization. I didn't need to keep looking back. My future was mine now. There was no need to try and piece together the remains of a marriage that had long since crumbled. No need to chase after apologies or answers I would never get. I had all the time I needed to rediscover who I was, to rebuild my life from the ground up. With that thought, I turned toward the parking lot, a sense of peace settling over me. I had made the right decision. But as I got closer to my car, something caught my eye. Parked just a few spaces away was a car I recognized all too well, Olivia's. A sick feeling churned in my stomach as I stared at it. What was she still doing here? Hadn't I just walked away from her? Was she waiting for me to come back, to change my mind? Did she honestly think that pouring her heart out would be enough to pull me back into the world we'd left in ruins? I hesitated, frozen for a moment as the thought of confronting her again crossed my mind. But then, something shifted inside me. No. She didn't deserve another chance. I wasn't the same man who had once believed love could conquer all. Life had taught me, painfully, that some choices couldn't be undone, no matter how much you might want them to be. And I couldn't keep holding on to the hope of fixing something that was beyond repair. Without a second glance, I turned away and walked to my car, my resolve firm. But just as I reached my car door, I froze again. Under the faint glow of the street lamp near her car, I noticed another figure. A man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and disturbingly familiar. My stomach churned as realization slammed into me like a freight train. It was him, the guy I had seen with her that day. The one she'd been sneaking around with. The same man who had shattered the foundation of trust I'd spent my entire life building. I don't know what came over me in that moment. Was it anger? Jealousy? Or maybe some desperate need for answers? Whatever it was, it propelled me forward before I had a chance to think. My legs moved on their own, each step pulling me closer to a confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for, but I knew I couldn't avoid. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice slicing through the cold night air. He spun around, startled. For a fleeting moment, I caught the look of surprise on his face, like he hadn't expected me to call him out. His hand shot up defensively, as if to ward off whatever was coming his way, though he didn't say a word. Within seconds I was standing right in front of him, my fists clenched so tight my knuckles ached. Everything I'd been holding back, the betrayal, the lies, the deep, soul-crushing hurt, came rushing to the surface like a tidal wave. I couldn't contain it anymore. "Did you think you could just walk into my life and destroy everything?" I hissed, my voice dripping with venom. "Did you honestly think it would be that easy to wreck everything I worked for and walk away like nothing happened?" He took a small step back, his eyes darting around like he was searching for a way out. But there was nowhere to go. "Look, man," he stammered. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't know. Don't feed me that crap." I cut him off sharply. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew who she was. Don't even try to act like some innocent bystander. You're just as guilty as she is. He swallowed hard, visibly uncomfortable now. I'm not looking for trouble, he said, his voice quieter, trying to defuse the situation. Too late for that. I growled, the words spilling out before I could stop them. The damage is already done. I didn't want to be this person, the guy who lost his grip, who let his emotions take control. But standing there, face to face with him, all I could feel was the anger boiling over. It wasn't just about him. It was about what I'd lost. About the utter disrespect they'd both shown me. About the life they'd ripped apart without a second thought. For a split second, I wanted to hurt him, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain they'd inflicted on me. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't give me the peace I was looking for. The man backed up another step, his eyes wide and wary. He was realizing, maybe for the first time, that I wasn't someone he could brush off or intimidate. Before I could decide what to do next, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound jolted me, breaking through the fog of my rage. I pulled it out, and a message flashed across the screen. It was from Olivia. I know what you're about to do, and I swear I never meant to hurt you. I'm so sorry, but you need to understand, I didn't leave you for him. I left because I couldn't be the person you needed me to be. I was lost. Please talk to me one last time. You deserve the truth. You deserve closure. I stared at her words, my thoughts swirling in chaos. My grip on the phone tightened as I reread the message, trying to make sense of it. But deep down, I already knew the truth. This was just another lie. Another excuse to dodge the consequences of what she'd done. More empty words meant to manipulate me. I didn't believe her anymore. I couldn't. Without a second thought, I deleted the message. Turning away from the man, who still stood there, frozen and unsure of what had just happened, I walked toward my car. I didn't look back. I didn't care what he thought, or what she had to say. As I climbed into the driver's seat and closed the door behind me, it hit me all over again. I didn't need her. I didn't need him. And I didn't need closure. What I needed, more than anything, was me.